Well, I've got 7 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brad Bergstrom, and I'm lucky enough to be the superintendent here in Sauk Rapids-Rice Public Schools, and I want to welcome you to the Wednesday, October 7th edition of the Storm Forecast. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I see some people are logging on and going to put comments in. I see somebody saying good evening to me and good evening to you as well. So happy for you to be here tonight. And so for those of you who are joining for the first time, just a gentle reminder that our purpose tonight with the storm forecast sessions is really for me to be able to try and answer questions that you in the community might have about things that are going on within Sauk Rapids-Rice Public Schools. A couple of things that we want to make sure that we do in terms of housekeeping items. Number one is, if you have a question, please feel free to put it into the comment section. We've got a couple of people here tonight, Jennifer and Christy, who will be moderating that and writing up the questions and giving them to me so that I can try to answer them for you. I may not be able to get through all of the questions, and if I cannot, we'll continue to take those questions and put them into our frequently asked questions section on the web page. And the final piece is that this is a wonderful opportunity, I think, for there to get some questions answered. And just remember that we want to treat each other with respect and treat each other with a sense of niceness that I think is important. So if we can do that tonight, as we've been doing a very nice job with since I've started doing these, I greatly appreciate it. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with tonight's session. The first thing I want to do is I want to take a little bit of time and talk a little bit about a couple of things that have changed and evolved since we last talked back in September. And the first piece I want to talk about is the amount of information that we can share with our staff, with our community in regards to COVID cases. When we talked back on September, I think it might have been the 21st, one of the things I shared with you is that between MDH and FERPA, we really could not share information in terms of the number of cases, who they are, et cetera. And what has changed since then is we are now able to go ahead and share the number of cases that we have with both our staff and with our students. And we have to share it in the aggregate. We can't break it down by building because we want to make sure that we're protecting those individuals' data privacy when it comes to being able to identify who they might be. So on our webpage, when you log on to www.isd47, that's the number 47.org, you can go to our coronavirus page and you will see that at the very top. We've got a listing of the number of staff that we have in the district and the number of people who are out with a positive COVID-19. And we're doing that for a 2-week time period. So we first put this on the webpage last Friday. So it was from October 1st going back to September 18th. So during that 2-week time period, there was a number that was there. And then to the right of that, we have our students, so those might be turned around, but on that page is also our students, the total number of students we have, and the total number of positive COVID-19 tests that we have. And again, we're not breaking that out by building, but rather letting people know what's going on within the district in terms of COVID-19 cases. And I want you to know that I think there was a lot of concern being expressed by you guys as a community and by superintendents such as myself that this is really hard, we can't communicate, we need to do something to let our community know a little bit more about what's going on, and those voices were heard and we're able to do that. And I also want to do a little teaser here that I'd really like for you to take a look at this week's update. And we're going to do this, by the way, we're going to update it each Friday, and it's going to be for the previous 2-week time period. It's not going to be a cumulative number, but for that previous 2-week time period. So for this coming Fridays, it'll be September 25th through October 8th, and we'll put the number for both our staff and our students on there. And again, that's a cumulative across the whole district. But we've also been made aware that we can share some additional information that you might find helpful in understanding where things are at as a district when it comes time for either the board to make a decision on what model we're going to be in, or if there's a building that has to be addressed in terms of where things are at. It'll hopefully paint a little better picture of where things are at. So I look forward to being able to share that with everybody. So stay tuned, and please feel free to log on to the website on Friday, and we will put that up there by 3 o'clock so that people will see where that's at. So just wanted to make you be aware of that. So that's been a change where we are actually able to start sharing some more information than what we could do before, and very happy to be able to do that. And one of the things I've said all along is if we can share information without violating somebody's privacy, staying inside of the ground rules for FERPA, and be able to help our community, we're going to go ahead and do that. So that's the one thing. Second thing is that as I've had some conversations with people, there just seems to be a lot of questions in regards to why does the school do it this way when it comes to COVID-19 and or people who have been in contact with somebody with COVID-19, and the place that I work, that it's done differently. And one of the key pieces that comes up is that in the private sector, if a business or an employer would want to, if somebody was in close contact with somebody with COVID-19, if they went and got tested and got a negative test, they could come back. So the question is, why can't students do that? Well, the guidelines from the Department of Health, which continue to evolve as we're working our way through this, the more we learn, the more we know, the more we've got to adjust and take a look at what those expectations are. So our guideline is that if you're in quarantine in a school setting, so we've got this school setting set of expectations in the private sector, and when it comes to the public sector or the school sector, we cannot have anybody test out of quarantine. So if you're in contact with somebody and you were in that close contact, you have to wait 14 days before you can come out, because in a school setting, the incubation period for COVID-19 can go out to that 12, 13, 14 days, and they want to make sure that it's not impacting others. So, I'm going to try to show this a little bit to kind of, I'm not sure you're going to be able to read it, but just this is the decision-making chart that we have from the Department of Health. It is also on our webpage, and it really kind of outlines for us what it is we can and cannot do when we have people who are having the symptoms. And just as a gentle reminder for people that maybe weren't here when I've talked about this in the past, MDH has really broken the symptoms for COVID down into two categories. There are the less common symptoms, and that includes things such as sore throat, nausea, vomiting, chills, muscle pain, etc. And then there's also a category of more common symptoms, and that includes a fever greater to or equal or greater to 100.4, not 104, 100.4, new onset or worsening of cough, difficulty breathing, etc. So if those symptoms are in place, or you've been in contact with somebody who has tested positive, we've got this chart that we need to follow, and it outlines what those expectations are, and they are different from what you might see for those that are in the private sector. So that's really the big reason is that there is a different set of ground rules that are being applied for this, and I don't know this for a fact, but because we're dealing with students in our buildings, and I believe that's why the expectations are looking a little different. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start looking at questions. So the first question is why is the middle school and the high school still in a hybrid when the elementaries are overcrowded and back in person? So the thing that we need to remember is that when the governor set up his plan for the Safe Learning Plan, what we thought was going to be in-person, hybrid, and distance learning as the three models, we actually wound up having 5. And inside of those 5, there are, depending upon where you are at with the COVID in your community and looking at some data points, you can actually have varying differences in terms of what plan you're in at the elementary level versus what plan you're going to be in at the secondary level. And part of this comes back to the fact that we know with younger children that they are less likely to be spreaders of COVID-19 as compared to older students and young adults and adults in general. So that's why you can have a situation where you can have the same set of numbers, but you can be in an in-person at the elementary level, and you can be at a hybrid level at the secondary level. Now, you won't see in-person, generally, you won't see in-person at a secondary level and hybrid at the elementary level. Again, it comes back to Department of Health recommendations about those that younger children are less likely to be spreaders of this. So that answers part of that question. The other piece is overcrowded. And we know what the maximum amount of space is that we can have, students we can have in a classroom. And I think one of the things that we need to remember is that we also have a number of students in our district who they and their families have chosen to do distance learning. And so because they're in distance learning, that's taken that group of students out of the mix. And so our class sizes have dropped down just simply because of that. The second thing to remember is that we have also, our staff have done a great job of really going in before the school year started, and they and the principals went through and said, okay, what are the things that we want to have in the classroom that need to be there for instruction, and what are those things that are nice to have, but we want to maximize the space. One of the things that even in an in-person model, we want to try to maximize social distancing to the greatest extent possible. And so with that in mind, our staff did a really good job of really having just those things that need to be in there. So we've actually created more space. And why were those things in there? I think teachers do a great job of really trying to create an environment where students feel comfortable. It's like a home piece for them. And so they bring in those pieces to help make that be a warm, safe, comfortable place. And with COVID, we really have to eliminate that just simply because we got to maximize the amount of space. So again, the middle school and high school are in a hybrid model because our data still continues to point towards that being the best option. And then elementary, it's okay for us to be at the in-school, in the in-school. And then I think the other piece to remember is that we're maximizing the amount of space. We have fewer students because we have a number of our families who are choosing distance learning. And so I wouldn't say that we're overcrowded, but I would also say that we are doing our best to maximize the space we have. The next question I have here is, do I know if youth winter sports will be allowed? And no, I don't know the answer to that question because that's really out of the school's control on whether or not that's going to be happening. But here's what I do know. What I do know is the State High School League has indicated that there will be winter activities coming this winter. We're very excited about that. It's going to be about 30% less of a season, and I don't think they're planning for state tournaments at this moment in time, but there is going to be those opportunities for participation, just like we've got opportunities for participation this fall, and then the State High School League has pivoted and come back to allowing volleyball and football to take place yet this fall. In fact, we got our first home volleyball game, our first volleyball match is on tomorrow, I believe, and it's up in Bemidji. And then I think next Tuesday is our first home match, which will be against the Spuds from Moorhead. And football, we are going to Monticello this coming Friday. And then next Thursday, because it's MEA, next Thursday at 5 o'clock, we're going to be having the football game against Wilmer. And it just go off on a little bit of a tangent here. Our indoor events, unfortunately, we can't have fans be there, but we will be streaming. And we will be, so people will be able to watch those. At our outdoor events, like football, for example, we can have up to 250 fans. And so just a quick note with that, our conference has decided that since we got 250 fans, we're going to allow 150 tickets to go to the home team and 100 to go to the visitors. If their visitors don't use all of them, then they can come back to the home team. But what we're doing as a priority is we are really focusing on providing those tickets to the families of our football players. And I think everybody can understand that as much as we want to go and watch and support the Storm and the football team, since we need to be limited in who can be there, that priority probably should go to our families. Just a gentle reminder for our community that we can't be around the fenced-in area and watching. Unfortunately, that would count towards our 250, and so it can't be there. And of course, there's no tailgating, those kinds of things. So we really need to make sure that we're honoring that, because if there's too many people there, then the football game cannot be held, and we just certainly don't want to get into that. So again, at the end of the day, we're going to try and provide, we're just really happy to be providing those opportunities for our student athletes to compete. I know it's hard sometimes, especially for families, not to be able to come and watch live and in person, particularly at those indoor events. But at the end of the day, the fact that we are able to compete is wonderful, particularly for volleyball and football, because we didn't think that was going to happen until the spring, and it's here now, and we're able to do that, and we'll continue to support the Storm in all of our activities, including our co-curricular activities such as art and band and music ensembles and one-act plays and speech, debate, all of those pieces. We'll continue to provide those opportunities for our students, because at the end of the day, giving them that opportunity is something that's a part of the experience of being in school, and we're happy to do that. So again, just back to the football games as a gentle reminder, we get 250 fans that can be there. 100 tickets will go to the visitors, 150 will come to us. If there's any leftover visitors, they'll come back to us, and the priority will be going to our football families, and that unfortunately we won't be able to have the rest of the public to be in there, and we also cannot be around the fence watching. We can't be in the parking lot tailgating, but we will be streaming all of our events so that the community will have a chance to watch those, which is, again, sure, it'd be nice to be there, but the fact that our kids are getting to compete is wonderful, and we're glad that option is available for them. So the next question is, how do subs impact decision-making? I'm actually going to step backwards a little bit of time, and I'm going to go pre-COVID-19, because I think the answer winds up being the same. Our subs do have an impact on our decision-making, and what that is going to look like, so that if somebody is gone, whether it is COVID-related or just life in general, where there's absences, doctor's appointments, non-COVID related illness, etc. We have been and continue to be in short supply of subs. And I think you've heard me say, for those of you that have been watching these on a consistent basis, that we really are in need of subs. And I keep asking for, if you got a 4-year degree, and it doesn't have to be in education, and you'd be interested in coming to help, that certainly would be helpful for us, because then it allows us to continue to be able to offer the classes and keep things going in the building as best we possibly can. Are there situations where schools in the state and around the country have had to do something different with their learning model because there wasn't enough coverage to adequately staff the building? Yes. So if you've got that 4-year degree, and if you're willing to come and help and sub for us, we'd love to have you, because we have a couple of different ways in which that can help out. So please reach out to our HR department and let us know. And having a good stable of subs ready to come and help us will certainly ease one of the burdens that happen when staff have to be gone for whatever that reason might be. This next question says, essential worker childcare. If we go to hybrid or distance learning, what are the hours? That's a great question. So at the elementary level, kindergarten through 5th grade, if we go into a hybrid model or a distance learning model, by governor's order, in the executive order, we as a school, all school districts, not just we, all school districts, we need to provide childcare for essential workers. So there's a couple of key points with this that I want to make sure that I touch on for you. Number one is that unlike last spring, the rules for essential childcare have changed slightly. One is that if you're in a two-parent guardian household, both parents, guardians have to qualify as essential workers in order to qualify for the free childcare. Okay? If it's a single parent guardian household, only that one parent needs to do that. So if you meet that criteria, the other thing that has changed is that schools are required to provide transportation to the essential child care location. And what we're choosing to use at this moment in time is the East Side Club over in St. Cloud. And we know that, we use that, for example, when PV was in distance learning for the 8 days that was taking place. And so we are obligated to provide transportation, but just during the school day. So to the question of what are the hours, it's the normal school hours that we are providing. The school is in session. And if you qualify as an essential worker, then that child care is at no charge to you. If your work is such that you would like to drop them off a little bit before that time, or you need to keep them there a little bit later than that, number one, we're not required to provide the transportation, and there could be a charge for that. So anything outside of the regular school day, there can be a charge for that. And excuse me. So just so that everybody is aware of that. So again, whether it's if we go into a hybrid or we go into distance learning, the key piece for families to remember is that if you're an essential worker and you're a two-parent guardian household, both have to qualify, single parent guardian, only one, we will provide that essential childcare at no cost. And we will pick up at our normal routes and times that we pick up students, and then they will be transferred and moved to the East Side Boys, or the East Side Club over in St. Cloud that's working for us. That we use for PV, and we really appreciate the cooperation that we get with the Boys and Girls Club to make this happen. The other piece that I will share with you is that if this is a service that you may be thinking about utilizing, I would go ahead and reach out to them and not wait until all of a sudden we have to pivot and move. And so if this is something you're interested in, please reach out to them, get yourself pre-registered and signed up. And by doing so, you're going to assure yourself that if the building that your child is in has to pivot and go to a hybrid or a distance learning model, that your child has the daycare taken care of or child care taken care of. And then you'll also know if you qualify or you and the other parent guardian in the household qualify, so you know where that's at. The equivalency of 2 master's degrees and a superintendent's license, and I can't take a sticky off of the paper that's on there. Amazing sometimes. The next question here is parent-teacher conferences, how will they take place? A great question, and I know I've had a couple of conversations with building level principals, and that information, if not already out to you, will soon be coming out. I know that they're putting the final touches on what this is going to look like and how we want to make this happen. So please be looking for that to come your way in the coming days, because I believe we've got conferences starting at the high school level as early as next week. And I know that the administrative team there is working on getting that communication out to you guys in a timely fashion. So look for that to be coming. So this question is, so 6 out of 4,415 cases, isn't that good? So this is in reference, I'm assuming, to the number of COVID cases with our students. And I will say that I would prefer that number be 0. okay? Because that means that none of our students have COVID-19, and that would make things be a lot better for us. So I don't know if 6 is good, bad, right, wrong. It's just 6 more than what I would like to see. And the one thing to remember is that this number 6 is during that 2-week time period. And so that number keeps moving on. And I think the other thing to remember is when we look at the decision-making tree, this piece that I pointed out a little earlier, one of the fundamentally important pieces is that so if somebody is at home or comes down with one of the more common symptoms, or if they've got 2 or more of the less common symptoms, it also starts to impact siblings. Those people in the household is maybe would be a better way to say that. And so that one COVID case then starts to impact other people in that household. If they have happened to have been in school, it may be impacting people that are in the school. And so I think the key thing to remember is as a community, is that we really need to work together to try and keep COVID away from us so that we can keep our students here in school as much and as long as we possibly can. And I know you've heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again because I feel pretty passionate about it. And that is that we all know that the best learning for our students would ideally be when they are here in the buildings with their teachers. And we have to be able to do that in a safe manner. And what's happening is that what's going on out in the community is working its way into our buildings. And then what happens is we have to start sending people home. And so these 6 cases in this question, again, I don't want any of our kids to have it. I really don't. I want them to live long, happy, healthy lives. And having COVID, while we don't know where that's going to go. And I'm going to get away from that a little bit and just talk about what we need to remember is the impact that it has on people that they've been in contact with. And so it's that concentric circle piece. You got one, and then all those people that they touch, and then if one of those winds up testing positive, there's another whole group after that. So really our best thing that we can do is really try as a community to do the things that they talk about, and that is social distancing, face coverings, washing our hands, and when we go to do things, to make sure that we are exercising caution in doing this, because COVID-19 just waits for our guard to come down, and then when it does, that's when it will do its thing, and then that's when it starts to impact us in the building. So it's not always just those total number of COVID cases, as this question points out, but it's also the impact that it has on others because of this document right here, where we have to start asking others to stay at home as well, which when it impacts teachers, that's when the sub piece comes into play, so on and so forth. So there's a number of moving parts to it, but ultimately at the end of the day, I'd prefer this number to be at 0. And we need to remember, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, whatever the number might be, it's not just those, it's the impact it has on others. The next question is, what care is provided for middle school students? They are too old for the Boys and Girls Club. And unfortunately, through the school, there's no programming, no plan for that. And again, the governor's executive order was pretty clear that it was for basically for those students who are kindergarten through 5th grade. For us here in the district, there are some districts that have K through 6 as their elementary level, 7 to 12 as a secondary level, and some are providing some pieces for the 6th graders. But for us, because 6th grade is part of the middle school, it's a K-5 piece. So unfortunately, there's not anything provided for that. I think part of the thought process with that is that the students who are older, middle school, high school, are more likely to be able to stay at home with less supervision than our younger students are. And I know that there's going to be exceptions to that, because I know there are some of our children who are a much younger age than the middle school age and can do very well at home. And I know that there are also students who are older that need that support and help. And it might be because they have physical disabilities, or they might have health conditions, etc. But unfortunately, at this time, we're providing for K through 5, and that's the extent of it. So the next question is, how is it being handled when children and staff, both on the bus and in school, are not wearing masks properly? And it's a great question, by the way. So let me talk a little bit about that protocol a bit. So we've gone through and tried to help everybody in the school here to understand, how do you properly wear a face covering? And I think that while most people get and understand it, sometimes even the one that I wear here earlier, this piece right here, sometimes you'll see a propensity, they'll slip down your nose a little bit. And so oftentimes what we need to do is we do need to just gently remind people. In a vast majority of the cases, when we remind people, they, oh, yep, we'll get that, and we get it taken care of. Now, there are cases where they're few and far between, but there are a few cases where somebody is exempt from having to wear a face covering. And with them, then it's just trying to do that social distancing piece, et cetera. But if there is a medical reason as to why this is happening, then that may be part of the reason. Sometimes people don't always understand that. And so we know who they are, and we try to work with them to understand what the expectations and where things are going to be at. Now, if it's not because of something that's just inadvertent, or they're not required to because they have an exemption, then it's really about education. And I'm going to use this as an example. And I was when I was a high school principal, cell phones were really starting to take off and become all the ways that families were communicating with each other. And in the school that I was in, we had an expectation that that students would not have their phones out during class time or during passing in the hallway. They were to put them in their lockers and leave them there. And over time, and if they did do that, then the phone got taken away. And as the principal, I started seeing we were getting 25 to 30 phones a day that were winding up in the office because people weren't following the expectation. And when we started asking questions about, well, why is the phone out? The vast majority of them were because they were talking to a parent or a guardian. And we sat down as a staff, and we really talked about our role as educators is to help kids understand, in this case the students in the building, is to educate them and help them to understand what the expectation is going to be, and to teach them how to do things properly. And so what we decided to do is, rather than trying to penalize kids all the time, is really just start working on helping students to understand what the expectation is going to be. And we adjusted it a little bit, and we went from those 25 to 30 phones a day to 1 or 2, because we began to educate kids on what this needs to look like. And so I use that example because I want to come back and talk a little bit about the mask piece. What we're really trying to do is really trying to help educate people. And if somebody's being obstinate, or somebody's just not willing to buy into the plan, then we got to have a very different conversation. But that looks very different than what we're trying to do with most of our students and staff, and just remind them. Like I said, a vast majority of the time it's just, oh, it slipped down, or I forgot it, or yeah, and they'll come into the office and grab one, and we can make that work. So, but when there are those scenarios, yep, we do have to have the conversation and the gentle reminder of what the expectation might be. And again, a vast majority of the time, it's just that quick reminder, and they're back to doing what they need to do. Has there been any update on the bus tracking app? Yeah. I did ask that question. I've got a weekly meeting with our transportation coordinator, and I did ask that question again this week. And while it's being worked on, unfortunately, I don't have a time frame. I pushed pretty hard for that, because I think it's important for families to know when this is going to be. But at this point, we still don't have that answer. But I'll continue to ask that question, and we'll when there's a timeline for what that's going to look like, we'll be sure and try to let families know that. This question says, explain the learning plan for each level when a student needs to quarantine. So let's talk first of all about, let's make sure we all understand what quarantine means. So quarantine is a term that is used that somebody has been inside, has had close contact with somebody who has tested positive for COVID-19. And when they go into quarantine, and when that happens, and again, so I'm going to back up here. Close contact is defined as inside of 6 feet with or without a mask for more than 15 minutes throughout the course of a 24-hour time period. So I was sharing the other day, and maybe I've even done this here, there were some students that thought, well, if we just stayed less than 15 minutes and then we would go somewhere else, then we can come back together for another 15 minutes. No, it's 15 minutes throughout the course of the day. So what they were doing is they were setting their timers for 14 minutes. They'd all go disperse, be away for a few minutes, and then come back together. Nope, if it's 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there, 5 minutes there, 8 minutes there, you've gone over your 15 minutes. That would be defined as close contact. And again, where does that definition come from? It comes from here. This is where this comes from. So if you have close contact with somebody who's tested positive, you need to be quarantined for 14 days. That's not 14 school days, that's 14 days. Okay? And depending upon when you had that contact with them, it's 14 days from that time period. So, as an example, if somebody tested positive on Sunday and they were in school on Friday, anybody who had close contact with them on that Friday would their 14 days would start on Friday. Okay? So during that time period, what winds up happening is we do what's called remote learning. And remote learning looks very similar to what's happening in distance learning, with the difference being is that the teacher is generally doing some live instruction to the students in that particular class. So if it was me and I was in teacher A's third grade classroom, that teacher would be providing instruction for them during the day remotely. And it's not on continually, but there would be moments of what we would do this remote learning, and there might be some work that they're doing on their own as well. So we don't move students into distance learning because they're going to be coming back. Distance learning is where it's 100% at home and they're not planning on coming back and doing anything with in-person learning until there's a natural break in the schedule. Those who are in remote learning, as soon as they've done their quarantine and they've had no symptoms, then they can turn around, they can come back into the classroom, and they're with that teacher again. So the big difference is quarantine, I'm staying with the teacher that I had when my in-person learning, whatever model that is, hybrid, or if it's an in-person learning. Distance learning, I've got a completely different teacher, and I've got that person all of the time. So hopefully that answers your question. So this question is for high-risk or vulnerable parents. Do you have times when high-risk families can pick up lunches? And I'm going to make a few assumptions with this. And so if your child is in a hybrid learning, or they are in distance learning, at times, we have a regularly established schedule that does allow for families to come and pick it up, and there's the protocols that are in place make it safe for people to come. However, if you do have some concerns with what that might look like, I'll ask that you reach out to food service and touch base with them. And if we need to do something to adjust because of a unique situation, I'm sure that they'd be willing to try and find a way to make that work for you if it's possible. Now, it might not be, but I know that we really try to work with our high-risk families as much as we possibly can in order to make sure that they are getting the meals, getting the food that they need to be having. So the question is, are you testing staff, teachers, bus drivers every morning before they pick up students? And the answer to that question is no. First of all, it's not a requirement. Number two, there's just not enough testing for us to be able to do that, and we would just simply flood the market. When I say flood the market, it would be a virtual impossibility for us to do that. We've got 650 plus employees that work here, and that's just not feasible. We know that with the current testing that's taking place, that even the turnaround for that is 3 to 5 days, 5 to 7 days. There are some more, the antigen test is coming back with sooner than that. So they are getting some turnaround with that, but we just simply don't have, there simply isn't the testing capacity outside of that. So no, we are not testing staff and teachers, bus drivers, et cetera, before they pick up students. What we are asking is that when you come into the building, that they are being checked for temperature scanning, and we're just continually reminding staff, if you have some either more than one of the less common symptoms or one of the more common symptoms, that you stay at home. And you've probably heard me mention this before as well. There's this component of that Midwestern pride that you know what, I fought through this. I wasn't feeling good, but I fought through it and I went to work. And I've been guilty of doing that myself. And really, in these times of COVID-19, it's really important that if you have symptoms at all, COVID-like, you need to make sure that you stay home. And if the symptoms are one or more of the more common, or two or more of the less common, you might want to consult with your healthcare provider to see if a test is going to be warranted. Speaking of testing, just a gentle reminder that over at St. Joseph, they're at St. Ben's, they are doing some free, no insurance needed COVID-19 testing. There is a sign up for pre-registration that, while not required, is certainly available. And you can do it by phone as well. If you get there and everything is full, they'll put you on a waiting list. But if you have some concerns, or if you just want to know, that option is available, and that is through tomorrow. So they had it yesterday, today, and we'll be doing it again tomorrow, and that's from noon until 6 at the field house, Clemens Field House, I think is the name of it, over at St. Ben's College. And so if you have some concerns, check it out. And again, there is this opportunity to do that, and there is a pre-registration, so if you want to make sure that you can get in there, otherwise you can certainly show up and see if they have any openings for you. This next question asks for essential care. I'm assuming this is students of our essential care workers, if we're in a hybrid or we are in a distance learning model. Are lunches provided, or they need to bring their own lunch breakfast? Great question. The answer to that is lunches and breakfasts are being provided. We worked with the Boys and Girls Club and had meals brought over, especially now with the extension of the National School Lunch Program and meals being provided for free. Breakfasts always have been free, and now with lunches being free, we are providing those and bringing them over to the Boys and Girls Club. So as long as that waiver for the National School Lunch Program is still in place, we'll be able to provide those lunches, and breakfasts we should, with or without the waiver, we should still be able to provide those as well. So the question is remote learning for COVID positive only? And the answer to that question is no. It would be for anybody who is having to be out because of having symptoms, COVID-like symptoms, or if they are in quarantine, or if they have tested positive. That's when remote learning will be utilized. And just as a reminder for everybody, what we're trying to do with this is try to maintain some consistency in terms of if it's at the secondary level, it's that schedule of teachers that are in place, and if it's at the elementary level, it's being with that teacher or some of those specialists that may come into play. And the amount of work that is required to make this happen for our staff is quite large, and they are doing the very, very best job that they can with it. So, but at the end of the day, again, I'll come back to the more we can keep COVID out of our community, the less likely it is that students are going to be impacted by it. And if we have less of an impact with our students, that means we can keep them here. That means we can have an in-person model, which is what we're all looking for, to do so in a safe manner. And it also means there's consistency for our kids in terms of how that instruction is being provided. And I think the other piece with that is it allows our teachers the opportunity to really concentrate and focus their time and energy on providing that in-person instruction rather than trying to do both at the same time. Will home volleyball matches be live streamed? The answer to that question is yes. In fact, I just had a conversation with our activities director earlier today, and the answer to that is yes, they're going to be live streamed. Will it be all grades? I do believe it's just the varsity only at this point, but I will certainly check into that and make sure that we get that information out if it's going to be more than just at the varsity level. So the next question is, what about asymptomatic people testing positive, kids too? So just as a gentle reminder, asymptomatic is people who are not showing symptoms and they may wind up testing positive for COVID. What we do, whenever there is somebody that tests positive for COVID, whether they were symptomatic, asymptomatic, whatever it is, we start the contact tracing process. And we do that in conjunction with Benton County Public Health and the Department of Health. Oftentimes we're working with Benton County Public Health, which has been a wonderful partner. Thank you, Nicole and Julie, for the long hours that you're putting in to help everybody across the region with this contact tracing. So we start that process of contact tracing to see who is going to be impacted, whether they need to quarantine or whether or not they need to be out, which we call isolation for a period of time. So we need to make sure, and isolation is generally if you're feeling some symptoms, those kinds of things. So bottom line is that if somebody tests positive, we immediately start the contact tracing process to see who is going to be impacted by that. So this question is, what is the plan for changing cohorts, homeroom teachers when more distance learning teachers are needed, like what happened 2 weeks ago at the middle school? We are constantly monitoring the number of students who are in our distance learning program. We are pretty close to 600, if not at 600 students across the district that are in our distance learning model that is being provided, which for those families, and it's working, that's great. So two key things to remember is, number one, we're constantly monitoring it, and when the need is there for additional staffing to be put into place, we try to find a way to make that happen with the least amount of disruption as possible. And we have added extra staffing at the elementary level. We've added some additional staffing at the secondary, particularly at the high school level. And now we are going to be looking at hopefully doing some staffing changes also at the middle school level to try and meet the needs of our distance learning families. So again, it's something that we're constantly monitoring and watching. And the next question is, I thought the point was to minimize student movement. Why rearrange cohorts or homerooms? Again, I'm not sure what the point with this one is, but yeah, we do want to minimize the amount of students that are moving. And if we need to do a shuffle with students in order to accommodate some staffing needs and requirements, again, when we start talking about the minimizing of cohorts, it's what we really want to talk about is that that there's some consistency with that. It's not to say that it can't ever happen, that there can't be a change with who's in what cohort. What it does mean is we don't want this group of kids today and then another group of kids tomorrow and then a third group, or we don't even know who's in that cohort. And that's why seating charts and those kinds of things are really important for us so we start that contact tracing piece. So to have some movement with students, do we try to minimize that? Absolutely. But if that's what we need to do in order to staff appropriately, then that's what we need to do. And again, it is, once that movement happens, it's not a movement that happens every single day, it's a different group, but now for a period of time, it's going to be this cohort of students, and that's generally done to meet scheduling needs, not because we just want to move people around. This next question asks, if a teacher tests positive, are most of their students considered a direct exposure? And it really comes back to that contact tracing piece. And so we start the process of contact tracing, and people are asked, who were you in contact with inside of 6 feet for more than 15 minutes? And then from there, you start asking those questions. And if it turns out that a teacher, or let's flip that around, if it was a student and they were in close contact, then the quarantining process needs to start. So at the end of the day, it's really dependent upon what the contact tracing is saying. And I know that since this summer, what is defined as being in close contact has changed, and I would suspect that that will continue to change as we learn more about how this virus works, and we learn more about what are those strategies that we want to put into place to keep it from spreading. Quarantining is really something that we don't want to do. Because it causes a disruption for families, for students, for the teacher, et cetera. But what's really important is we want to make sure that we are preventing the spread of the virus. And so by doing that, if somebody has to quarantine, then that's what we have to do. So this next question is, what is the plan for kids who get colds, flu, allergies, and get a negative COVID test when they come back? That's a really great question, because we're going to be coming into that, we're into that time of the year right now, right? So what we wind up doing with this is, if somebody has symptoms, in each step of the way, what we can do is they can go see their medical provider, and if the medical provider says, yeah, we need to do a COVID test and it comes back negative, and they are symptom-free, they can come right back. If they go see their medical provider and the medical provider says, no, this is not COVID, it's allergies, and I'll just use that as an example, the note comes back to us and they're back in school right away. So what we're asking for is that there needs to be some sense of getting medical documentation that says, nope, that this is not COVID-19, whether that's a test or whether that is a medical provider providing an alternative explanation for what's going on, then the students can turn around and come back in right away. And that's the difficulty with this, is that the symptoms that we see with COVID-19 are often similar symptoms to what we see with allergies, the flu, cold, etc. But again, if we get medical documentation, or if they are if they get a negative test, they can come right back. And remember, that's if they are having symptoms. If they are inside of that close contact with somebody who's tested positive, then they've got to stay out for 14 days. So just trying to hopefully separate those two out. Well, I do not see any additional questions right now, so I just want to talk about a couple other things here real quick. And I looked up and it says 7:53 on my clock. Okay, time flies, right? So a couple of things that I want to make sure that we've got cleared up here is that for food service, because we've got MEA coming up next week, and yes, it is still called MEA, with that coming up, we'll be out of school Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week. And for those families who are in the gold groups, for those at the hybrid level, you on Friday, you will pick up your 4 meals, because we are not going to be providing meals over for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because we don't have school. But you'll be able to get your meals that you're supposed to get, and you'll pick those up on Friday. Our green families have picked up their 4 meals on Tuesday. And then our distance learning families picked up their meals on Wednesday, and they wound up actually picking up 7 meals. And then same thing with our early childhood families. They picked up those meals as well. So just a gentle reminder, if you are in the gold group, your meals will be picked up on Friday, and you'll get your 4 meals, so it'll get you through to that week after we get back from MEA. And then just also a real gentle reminder for our families that it's really important that you sign up each week to get for those meals. It just gives our food service staff a better idea of how many meals to prepare, because we don't want to be making too many meals and therefore not being able to utilize those. So just a gentle reminder with that. Last but certainly not least, I want to just go through a couple of things here. Again, I talked about the sub piece. We would absolutely love to have you if you've got a 4-year degree. Subs are something that even pre-COVID-19 was in short supply, and oftentimes they are a number of our retired staff and that are in a higher risk category, and certainly understand them wanting to make sure that their health is taken care of. So if you have a 4-year degree and you are willing to come and sub, we would certainly love to have you, and please contact our HR department for that. Please also know that we are constantly getting updates from the CDC, the Department of Health, and Department of Education, and so we'll update our Safe Learning Plan. Really want you to check in with that on a weekly basis. Any changes are written in red from what it was from the previous time. And then there's going to be no storm forecast next week. That with MEA break, I'm going to be out of the district, and so we'll pick up our next one at 7 o'clock on Wednesday, October 21st, and I look forward to coming and trying to being able to answer some of your questions. And last but certainly not least, you've heard me say this a couple of times, and I just want to reiterate this. I really want to thank those of you who out in the community are doing your best to make sure that you're following those good practices of wearing a face covering, social distancing, and also the hygiene piece. As a community, we will go with you as a school. And again, we want our kids in school. That's the best place for them to be working every day with our wonderful staff. But we really need your help. And as you're probably aware, those numbers in the county are going up, and it makes things really difficult for us to provide that safe environment. So your help would be greatly appreciated, and just helping to make sure that our kids and our staff stay safe, and so that we can keep them here in school. So again, those of you that are out there doing that, greatly appreciate it. Keep spreading that message. And these are definitely difficult times for all of us, but together we will get through this. And I am honored and thankful that I'm here to be your superintendent. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And wait a minute here, I got one last note. Hold on. Green. Oh, yes. Next week, I had to look at this question for a second. Thank you very much. I had to look at this for a second. Just one last gentle reminder. Next week, we have 2 days of school, and we're running a modified schedule. And normally we would do green Monday, Tuesday, gold Thursday, Friday. And we didn't want to have our gold students go for an extended period of time with not having any contact with their teachers. So we've modified the schedule, and we're going to do we're going to spend a little bit more time making sure that the building gets the good cleaning that it needs. But we're going to run our green kids on Monday for those at the secondary level, and then we're going to run our gold kids on Tuesday, because we do want to let them have a chance to connect with their teachers before the MEA break. And then we'll go back to our normal schedule starting on the 19th. So again, green students Monday at the secondary level, and gold students will be in on Tuesday. It's a bit of a modified schedule, but academically that seems to make the most amount of sense, and we'll work to make sure that we get the building prepped and ready for students when they come in on Tuesday, make sure the building's safe. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Again, thanks for all that you do. Thanks for joining me tonight. Have a great night, and go Star.